Good morning, Ramblers, and welcome to another weekend and another Reese Rambles, my weekly podcast all about the comings and goings in the worlds of vintage computing and retro technology, retro gaming, all that lovely stuff that we love. Hope you're all doing well. Thank you ever so much for joining me again this week. And this week is a very special one because I am completely rushed off my feet today, but in a good way. I'm really kind of pleased to be involved with this. So today is the load-in for the Kickstart Amiga show, which is up in Nottingham. Nottingham's really local to me. It's like less than an hour's drive away, so really handy for me. But Ravi, who actually organises the event, who you may know from the Retro Hour podcast, fantastic retro gaming podcast, invited me to go to the show last year. He's quite a good friend of mine. And I wandered around and spoke to loads of people, saw some awesome demos, some awesome machines set up, and sellers selling some really cool stuff. And I just had an amazing time. There were some great talks. The after party on the Saturday night was really, really good. Had a bit too much to drink, but anyway, I talked about all of that in a previous Ramble last year. But this year I was invited back to actually exhibit and show some stuff off. And you may think, but Reese, you're an Atari guy. What are you doing exhibiting stuff at an Amiga show? And yeah, you know what? I'm as surprised as you are. And some of you will probably be listening to this on your way into the show. I actually spoke to a surprising number of you who listened to these and actually watched my channel last year. So I'm not gonna give any spoilers in this. But pop in and see my stand in the user group room, and I think you'll be pleasantly surprised at what I've managed to put together. It's all Atari stuff, but there's a bit of a twist to it, so that's all I'll say. And for the rest of you who unfortunately can't join us at the show, I am putting together a bit of a video, a bit of a vlog type thing. If you've seen Clint's, LGR's recent VCF video that he did on his phone, really entertaining stuff. I've basically just completely stolen that idea, so I'm hopefully going to be putting together something like that over the weekend. Recorded some of the rounding the stuff up, and hopefully get a chance to do some recording while I'm there. But that's that, and that's the reason that I'm in a bit of a rush to get this out the door today, because as soon as this is finished, as soon as I finish recording, I've got to very quickly drop it onto a timeline and turn it into something at least semi-coherent. I've got to upload it, and then I've got to jump straight in the car and drive up to Nottingham and drop all that stuff off before the load-in finishes at 6 o'clock this evening. So let's get on with it. So first up, I wanted to address some really interesting comments that I had on a recent video of mine, and I thought, well, what better platform to use than this, because it was on this channel, on my second channel, and a lot of those comments were from the very same people that comment on these Rambles as well. And it's the video that I did all about the Tarzan prototype for the Atari 2600. This, of course, is a prototype game. I've got a bit of reception going on here if you're watching this on YouTube, but this, of course, was a prototype game that was recently preserved and released by the Video Game History Foundation on their website, and claims to be basically, I say prototype, but it was basically finished, a port of the Tarzan ColecoVision game to the Atari 2600. And it's really, really advanced for its day. It's got this health bar at the top. It's got all these different kind of gameplay styles and moving elements and stuff like that. And the comments that I had, and I've had quite a few of these, were basically people saying that they think there might be something a little bit fishy about this. And I must admit, it did get me thinking, because, I mean, how do we know this is an actual unreleased prototype from back in the day? Because for all we know, it could be a modern... a modern forgery, a modern fake, made using modern tools that can really push the system to its limits that, of course, weren't available back in those days, especially with things like the kind of the mapper that it used and stuff like that being really unusual. And it really got me thinking, and I thought, well, surely the best comparison is to compare it to the original ColecoVision version. Now, I'm not here to prove a point. I haven't done, any kind of extensive look into this or studying of this, but of course, the ColecoVision version, the graphics are far more advanced than the 2600. I mean, this is a video from 15 years ago. But of course, the graphics are a lot more advanced. The gameplay, obviously, the stages, the levels, the different screens that we have are very reminiscent of the version that we have on the 2600. So we've got this one that I came across where I couldn't work out what to do, where you've got these monkeys in cages and you've got to climb, and apparently you've got to actually climb down into the cage and open it, which I couldn't work out because I'm a big dum-dum. And, you've got obviously the swinging, you've got the hunter that comes and shoots at you, and these monkey things that chase you. And it's all very reminiscent. And this wasn't a game that I was familiar with. There's also this kind of climbing, this kind of multi-level climbing stage that I've seen some screenshots of, actually, in the new 2600 so-called prototype. And I didn't actually get this far, so I didn't get to play this. But yeah, it does have the elements, the modern gaming elements that people were kind of disputing, like the health bar at the top. The gameplay is all there. Obviously, the graphics are a lot more crude on the 2600. And it's not, I don't think it really proves anything either way. It's not really definitive, is it? But it's really got me scratching my head and really got me thinking about this newly discovered prototype and the actual story behind it. I mean, could it be some kind of big forgery? It's quite interesting. I mean, I think some of the documentation and some of the stuff that the Video Game History Foundation have released from back in the day, it is actually historical. There are records of some of that stuff actually existing back in 1983. But is that what the game looked like back in 1983? It's a real puzzler, isn't it? And I like a good mystery. I don't like conspiracy theories for conspiracy theories' sake. But yeah, it gets you thinking, doesn't it? So perhaps it's something that's worth a bit more of a dig into. I'd love to know your thoughts on this down in the comments, of course. I know a lot of you who kind of posted those initial comments will be back and listening to this, but I just wanted to acknowledge it because I think it's interesting and I don't think it's something that could be easily dismissed out of hand. Anyway, that's enough about me for 1 week, but yeah, sadly not enough scandal and drama, I'm afraid. This isn't YouTuber drama, I'm not one of those kinds of people, but something quite big is happening in the world of vintage hardware at the moment, and this has been quite big news this week. But I've also seen quite a lot of chatter on like the back channels, YouTubers talking to each other, stuff like Telegram and Discord, and even quite openly on Twitter and stuff. And there's an angle to this story that I just wasn't aware of at all until people started mentioning it to me, and it was like, I should talk about this, so I'm going to. And this concerns Paul Allen, who was, of course, the co-founder of Microsoft alongside Bill Gates. Not nearly as well known as Bill Gates. Of course, Bill Gates kind of made himself the face of the company, very kind of outgoing and outspoken. Paul Allen was a lot quieter, but also went on to be one of the richest men in the world for, obviously because he co-founded one of the biggest technology businesses in the world, the biggest technology business in the world at one point, I believe. And Paul Allen very sadly passed away back in 2018 at the age of 65 from something called non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, which is, of course, a form of cancer. Very sadly, 65 is not much of an age in this day and age. And he was an avid collector of all sorts of things. He liked to spend his money on stuff like fine art and wine, and also had quite an extensive computer collection, which included some of the most historically important computers ever made. I mean, he had stuff like Steve Jobs had an Apple I, of course, which was the first computer that Apple ever made. Steve Jobs had one made with a custom metal case, which he kept in his office at Apple, and that actually became part of Paul Allen's collection. One of the PDP, or the original PDP machine that he and Bill Gates actually developed some of Microsoft's earliest software on, Microsoft Basic and that really early stuff in the 1970s. That was part of the collection, and he put all of this stuff in a museum. And this is it's based in Seattle, of course, home of Microsoft, and it was called the Living Computers Museum. Now, this museum has actually been closed since 2020. A lot of stuff shut down in 2020, and it never reopened. And it's up to his family to kind of manage this and obviously manage his estate and stuff, and predominantly his sister, apparently. And she has a bit of history of some quite dodgy goings on. I've kind of been hearing this week. So she's been selling off a lot of his stuff, a lot of his personal, personal possessions. There was a fine art sale. So there was, in November 2022, there was an auction of 155 masterpieces from Allen's extensive art collection, and it was the world's most successful single-owner fine art auction ever, raising a record $1.62 billion. That's billion with a B. And, I'm getting this from geekwire.com. Of course, I'll link to this and everything else that I mentioned in this ramble in the usual places. And yeah, so his family have sold that, and they're also now selling off his museum with all of these really sort of historically and culturally important artifacts in it, which is a real shame. Of course, I never got the chance to visit this museum myself, but surely there's enough money in the pot that they could have funded the running of it, or they could have put it into the hands of a trust or something, and it could have been self-sustaining somehow. But no, it's been shut down and everything's being sold off. And apparently a lot of the the trusts and foundations and stuff that he set up for raising money for charity over the years when he was alive. I've also heard some rumours that some of that is now, or a lot of that is now being redirected to stuff like venture capital funding and, investing and trying to turn it into even more money. Which is sad, but I guess ultimately that's it's kind of up to his surviving family to run stuff in what they believe would have been his interest. But really, really sad that this collection of important stuff that was all contained in one place and displayed and documented, and it is all being split up, and it's all going to be going to different sort of far-flung areas. Some of it will probably end up disappearing into people's private collections, never to be seen again, which of course is always a real shame. Hopefully some other museums will be picking up bits and bobs, but because of the nature of some of this stuff, it's going to cost them an awful lot of money. So quite a sad bit of news to see this museum being kind of parted out and sold off to the highest bidder. But just wanted to talk about that, particularly some of the surrounding story around it. I'm not the kind of person to spread rumours, but I am hearing this stuff from multiple places, and it is something, sadly I have been rushed off my feet this week, so I haven't been able to sort of dig into it any deeper than that. But maybe it's something you know a little bit more about and want to talk about down in the comments. Maybe I'm completely wrong. Maybe next week I'll be issuing an apology video to his family, or they'll have sued me. Quite sad news in the world of vintage computing this week. Anyway, let's move on to something a little bit more positive for our next story. And I'm going to start this story by posing to you a question, and I would actually genuinely be interested. This isn't some lazy engagement bait. I would actually be genuinely interested in hearing your thoughts on this down in the comments, because I don't think there could be a wrong answer to this question, because it's all one of personal experience and personal history. And that question is, what is your favourite CPU? I know, right? But actually, once you start thinking about it, there's so many really good contenders for this. I mean, in my case, there's the 6502 that powered that very first computer that I ever used, the Acorn Electron. Of course, the 6507, which is very closely related to that, which powered the 2600, which was the first console I ever played on. And then, of course, we went on to the Atari ST, which had the 68000 in it, which is another absolutely iconic CPU in loads of really important systems, the Amiga, the original Apple Macs, the Sega Mega Drive. And then, of course, we go into the PC era, and I've completely skipped over ARM, haven't I? Of course, there's the ARM, very revolutionary. I think pretty much everyone's got one in their pocket nowadays. Quite an important British success story, I think. And if you put any of those forwards, of course, there's the Z80 as well on that side of things in the 8-bit era, powered the Sinclair Spectrum and all of those kind of low-cost British machines. But if you put any of those forward, I don't think I'd disagree with you, because, just all a matter of opinion. But I think a strong contender in my case, and this is related to this story, this is a great setup, this is. I think a very strong contender in my case would be the 486 DX266. And the reason for that is because it was the CPU in the very first PC that we ever owned. And it was on that CPU that I discovered things like Doom and Windows, and even I think my first sort of dalliances with the internet, with AOL 2.5 on Windows 3.1 were running on that CPU, or maybe the DX4100 that we upgraded it to a little bit later on. But certainly the 486DX, I think, is a very important CPU in my own personal story. And there has been some news in the 486 world this week, which is absolutely fascinating. And I was actually tagged in this on Twitter by Alberto Martinez, which is a name that has come up many times before. I know he's a fan of the channel, so shout out to Alberto, of course known as Retro Tinkerer. And he tweets to me and a few other people, what a wonderful thing that a new 486 has been discovered and tested by Doc TB on his awesome universal chip tester. which of course is known as the UCA, or the Universal Chip Analyzer. And yeah, I wasn't even aware of this device, but essentially it's a device that he's designed that plugs into a computer, and you can plug any chip into it and it will thoroughly test it, and it creates a database of all these things, and it tells you exactly what it is. And it's really useful for identifying like clones and things like that from back in the day, because there were absolutely loads of them made by various different companies around the world, some direct one-to-one clones and some actually doing some quite clever things and modifying the designs. And this is a story on x86.fr, which is DocTB's own personal website. And this is absolutely fascinating. I mean, for a start, it goes into the history of the 486 CPU in quite a lot of detail and depth, and the various different manufacturers that were kind of churning them out and their own sort of variations and takes on that formula, which I found this really interesting. Of course, this will be linked, like all of the other stuff that I talk about. And it goes on to he goes on to do some testing with some CPUs that he's just got his hands on, which were made by a Chinese company called State Microelectronics, and he puts them in the Universal Chip Analyzer and tests them and puts them through their paces. One of them is a DX33, 486 DX33, and the other one is a DX266, and that all ties in nicely to my intro, doesn't it? But yeah, it's a really good technical analysis, a bit of a detective story, a bit of a history, a bit of a historical documentation as well. And I just really love this. And it's led to the discovery of a CPU that was previously unknown to the world of CPU collectors and historians, that was made by this little Chinese company. Essentially an Intel clone, but with a bit of a twist. Not sure how much of the story I want to kind of spoil for you, but I think even knowing the eventual outcome, it's still a really fascinating journey. But yeah, it's just a really fascinating thing. And to have it discovered after all these years, having this thing in various devices and CPU collectors just being completely unaware of it, I thought was really fascinating. And love the story behind this, love the technical journey, the detective journey that DocTB's gone on to uncover this chip. I just wanted to draw attention to this because it's a really well written article. It's a really great website anyway, and thank you, Alberto, for the recommendation. And all that talk of 486 and early PC era DOS gaming leads me quite nicely into my next story, which, yeah, it's almost like I planned this thing, isn't it? But I promise I don't. Speaking of Doom specifically, but also those other games that I loved to play as a kid, stuff like Duke Nukem 3D and Descent and Dark Forces, and yeah, all of that wonderful stuff. Of course, a big part of installing those games and getting them running was going through the setup program and choosing your audio device. And we had an ESS audio drive, so I would always pick the Sound Blaster clone option if there was one, or just the Sound Blaster option. And history has actually been quite kind to the ESS audio drive. It's actually kind of quite fondly remembered as being one of the better clones. But of course, there were other things in that list that were really puzzling to me as a child, as a kind of a 10-year-old and a young teenager. Stuff like the Disney Sound Source and the Roland MT32, and you'd look at them and the Covox or whatever it's called, and the AdLib, even that. I mean, we lived in a much more kind of isolated time, and you'd look at them and you think, well, what are these things? How do they work? What do they sound like? And one that has become a bit of an obsession in the worlds of retro computing and specifically retro gaming is the Roland Sound Canvas, of course. The SC-55, which specifically was used by Bobby Prince to compose the actual music for Doom. So one of my personal favourites. And of course, there's the SC-88, which was kind of the bigger brother of that, the much more capable version of that. Various different ways to emulate these devices. You've got stuff like, Raspberry Pi based things and all the rest of it. But one thing that has kind of been missing over the years is a dedicated software emulator, and specifically one that you can plug straight into DOSBox. And I'm very pleased to report that that is now a thing. So this is over on nerdlypleasures.blogspot.com. Of course, Nerdly Pleasures, a fantastic website, it's been around forever. This is from a couple of days ago, and it's called Nuked SC-55, nuked as in Nuked, Duke Nukem, all of that. True Roland SC-55 emulation is here. And it says here that the Roland Sound Canvas has long been a white whale of DOS emulation. While there have been several efforts from Roland over the years to emulate the Sound Canvas line, they've not targeted the modules used by most DOS games, the SC-55 and the SC-55 Mark II. And other emulation methods have not quite hit the mark for other reasons. Reading this directly from Nerdly Pleasures, of course. Recently, an emulator author with the handle NukiT, I love that handle, NukiT, has released an emulator called Nuked SC-55. And in this article, I will tell you how to run it with DOSBox and other programs. And of course, as you would expect from this website, goes into great detail in how to set all of this up, get it hooked up to DOSBox so you can play all of those wonderful games with this highly accurate SC-55 software emulator. And yeah, it just looks like a wonderful thing, doesn't it? I think it's a really great addition to the world of emulation and to DOS gaming. And if it helps, if it helps more people to experience this thing and the glorious sounds that it can generate, then I'm all for it. I think it's a fantastic thing. So I wanted to draw your attention to that as well this week. And it's certainly something that I'm going to be having a play with myself. I might make a little video about this if I can get it up and running and it's not too much trouble. But I'm also very aware that I've taken on an awful lot of projects just lately, and I really do need to get something out of the door. So it might not be soon, and you might be better off checking it out yourself. Right, so we're going all in on the boomer shooters this week, it seems. That's the direction that the topics are leading us down, and who am I to argue? So I'm going to pick this for my video of the week. I actually watched this last week, but it led me to purchase a game on Steam, and I bloody love this game. And this game is so me that multiple people actually messaged me when this video came out saying, have you seen this? You should play this. And I totally agree. I've been spending some evenings over the past week or so playing this game, and I loved it. And I particularly love this specific YouTuber and his reviews of stuff. You're probably familiar with him. You've probably already watched it, but it gives me an excuse to talk about this game, so I'm going to do it anyway. And this is Selaco. And the video is called Selaco is Magic. Selaco, however you say it. And it's a review by Civi11. I love Civi. I love his attitude. I love his humour. He's one of my absolute favourite YouTubers. And of course, he covers all of the boomer shooters that I love so much, these retro-styled first-person shooters. And I'm never going to stop using that term, so apologies for that. But yeah, this is based on GZ Doom or GZ Doom, of course, which was originally started off as a port of the of the Doom engine, and has grown into this much bigger, far more sophisticated and capable game engine in and of itself. And this game is absolutely beautiful. It plays absolutely amazingly well. It's got all the retro stylings that you want from a game like this. If you like stuff like Ion Fury and stuff like the remasters of Quake 2 and Quake and stuff that Night Dive have been working on, this will be right up your street. And I love it. It's a great game. I'm part of the way through it at the moment. Still got a fair way to go, I think, based on this video. There's not too many spoilers. There are some kind of later game things, but he does very clearly mark them if you do want to skip them. But yeah, I love the way this game looks. I love the way this game plays. And ultimately, I love this video. So if you don't want to go out and buy it, or you're undecided, or you've never even heard of it, definitely watch Civi's review. It's very, very entertaining, if nothing else, and it's a great look at a great game. And to be honest, he's usually very kind of thorough and very impartial and very he doesn't hesitate to kind of point out the bad bits and very loudly mock them in the stuff that he reviews. But I don't think he had a single negative thing to say about Selaco. I think I think he said it was one of his absolute favourite games that he'd ever played. And I'm fully on board with that. So that's the video. Of course, that will be linked in the usual places. And also play the game because it's great. And finally, as my regulars have, I'm sure, come to hope for and expect, I've got to do a bit of Atari news, haven't I? I mean, that's my thing, that's what I do. And there have actually been some really exciting bits of news coming out of modern day Atari in the past week. A couple of things that I'm definitely going to be checking out myself. So let's dive straight into those and get myself in an Atari mood before I spend the weekend amongst a load of Amiga owners trying to sell to them the virtues of the world's greatest and original gaming company. Wish me luck. But yeah, first let's look at some news. And the first one is this new expansion for the Atari 50 collection that was announced this week. And I know that they have released some more games and things for this. I think there was some more Jaguar games and 2600 games that came out previously. This, of course, was the Atari 50 collection, which was released to celebrate Atari's 50th anniversary back in 2022, I believe it was. And I bought this and I loved it, and I still, fire it up and have a poke around occasionally. Loads of great historical documents and interviews, and of course the actual games themselves that you can go into and play in different emulators and stuff. Really nice, coherent experience, and really nicely packaged up by, of course, Digital Eclipse, who developed this thing. And yeah, they've announced that there's a really big expansion coming out this October, which looks really cool. So this is the Atari 50. It's called Atari 50, the Anniversary Celebration Expanded Edition, which is quite the mouthful. But it will add 2 new timelines. So of course we had the different timelines for the different eras of Atari in the original version, and 39 playable games, along with, of course, all of the historical information and documentation and interviews and things to tell the stories behind those games, as we have come to expect from this collection. It's going to be released on all the usual platforms: PC, Switch, Xboxes, PlayStations, and indeed the Atari VCS, if you're still using that and it's not gathering dust somewhere like mine. And yeah, there will be physical editions and a Steelbook edition for the Switch, which comes with extra goodies like Atari 2600 art cards, miniature arcade marquee signs, and an Al Alcorn replica Syzygy Co. business card. I'm going to have to buy that version now, aren't I? Oh, that sounds cool. Okay. Standard version will be $39.99, and the Steelbook will be $49.99. And there's some conversions here, but I'm pretty sure they won't end up being the UK prices. It's probably going to be £39.99 and £49.99 here in the UK, isn't it, being honest? And the 2 new timelines I'm particularly excited about. So they're basically billing this as the wider world of Atari. The first one, which has 19 playable games and 8 video segments, and takes a series of deep dives into stories from Atari history, as reported here by techradar.com, I should give them credit, and of course I'll link to this. And it shows how Atari continued to influence creators and fans over the decades. So, yeah, perhaps some scope in there for maybe some ST stuff. Is that too much to hope for? Don't know. I know the fact that the ST barely got a mention did raise some eyebrows from some people in the community in the original collection, quite rightly so. So you never know. Or maybe some more obscure stuff, like maybe the 2 decent games on the Falcon. Actually, decent is a bit of a stretch, isn't it? Maybe they've managed to dig up some unreleased Panther stuff that we can play with. That would be exciting, wouldn't it? But yeah, really looking forward to that. The wider world of Atari. Of course, it's not all about gaming and the 2600 specifically. Covered quite heavily, but I mean, to be fair, I think that's only reasonable. Also, it will also feature new interviews, vintage ads, historical artifacts, and more. Have all been researched and presented. That's a bit of a mangled sentence, isn't it? All been presented with Digital Eclipse's signature style. Yeah, and of course the other timeline, and this is the one that I'm really interested in. Of course, the way that the original Atari 50 was structured is they had different timelines for different eras of Atari, and they're adding the 2 new ones. So there's the wider world of Atari, and there's this second one, which is called the First Console War. Now, if you think back a couple of rambles ago, I reported that Atari had acquired the rights and the name, and indeed the entire back catalogue of Intellivision, which was a competing console that was made by Mattel and later kind of spun off into its own brand. More recently known for the Amico, which has been a bit of a fiasco, and the original Amico team have retained the rights to that and will be continuing to develop that under a new brand. But all the historical stuff is now owned by Atari, and this is what they're doing with it. They're releasing it 20 playable games from the Intellivision's back catalogue. All of the historical documentation and stuff to go along with those to tell the stories behind those. So that'll be really cool to see. I'm very much looking forward to checking that out. In fact, when this acquisition first happened, the one thing that I said was that I was really hoping for a decent collection of this stuff so I can actually discover it, because it's a console I know absolutely nothing about. And putting it in this format is absolutely perfect. I couldn't have asked for any more. So really looking forward to playing this when it comes out in October. And I also mentioned that there was another piece of Atari news, so I'll go straight into this because it's only a very quick mention. And this is Neo Sprint, which was released this week. This is, of course, a remake of the classic Atari game Sprint for modern systems with modern graphics and modern gameplay. And yeah, looks quite interesting, actually. I'm not sure if I'm going to pick this up and give it a play, but maybe I'll wait for it in a Steam sale. It's only just been released, so it's not going to be in the summer sale, is it? But looks like a fun little racing game, bit of a couch multiplayer type stuff. It's as we can see in the trailer here, it's got a track editor and all of that lovely stuff, so you can create your own tracks with different themes and different vehicles. And it just looks like a cool little racing game. If you're used to like skid marks and what was the Iron Man something super off road? It's that kind of top down isometric-ish view, but. Of course, Sprint was the original, the OG, so nice to have an official remake of that, and looks like they've done a fairly decent job of it, but I've not had a chance to play it yet. If I do, of course, you'll be the first to know. But thank you ever so much for joining me once more this week for Reese Rambles. If you're on your way to the Kickstart show in Nottingham, I'm very much looking forward to seeing you, so do please, of course, pop in and see me at my table in the user groups room. But if you're one of the people that unfortunately isn't able to make it, I'm hopefully going to be putting together a video as mentioned, and that should be out here on my second channel. Or, hey, if it ends up being good enough, maybe I'll put it out on the main channel. It's been a while since I've released anything on there, isn't it? But anyway, no matter what your plans are for this weekend, I hope you have a wonderful one, and I'll hopefully see you again next week. Bye.